Hey everybody. So today we are going to discuss the books I read in February. And because it was Black History Month, we are actually going to start with historical fiction reads that I read. Don't worry, romance and everything else will be coming towards the end. So stick around. But the first book that I want to discuss is actually Remember by Toni Morrison. And this is about integrating schools or the fight to integrate schools. It is historical fiction in the sense that Toni Morrison has written this book from the perspective of the children and what they may have been thinking and feeling during that time. So it was actually really interesting. One thing I really loved about it is the photography. There's so many great pictures throughout. I think that this was written for children or young adults, and the way that it's written, most often it is in very short blurbs. And so for me, I found that if I was younger, or for me, I thought that if I were younger, this would probably be really profound. I'd probably learn a lot. It'd be really insightful. But me as an adult who is pretty well versed in Black history, I didn't really get too much out of it. But I am glad that I have it. And I am glad that I read it. I do think that it was a bold and unique take to try to embody and envision what the children and those involved may have been feeling at that time. It was interesting. It was interesting. Some of them were really poignant. Some of them were interesting. It was like, huh, maybe. But it's Toni Morrison. Um, so yeah, I think that it's a worthwhile read, especially if you have children or young people in your life. I ended up giving this a read when you have time, but again, I think that if I were younger, it would have been much more impactful and hit in a different way. So keep that in mind. All right, the next book I want to discuss is one that it took me a while to get through, but I'm glad that I did. That is The Reformatory by Tana Dew. This book is a historical fiction about a school for the boys, a reformatory school in Florida. It is fictionally based on a real school, and it's about the abuses that happen there. But the plot that gets us there is we have a young man or we have a young boy who is defending his sister from an older white boy who is just being overly aggressive and in her space. And it's clear that she doesn't want to be bothered and he doesn't care. And so they've known each other all their lives. And what should have been an innocent kick of a young boy defending his sister turns into an entire affair, and the young boy is sentenced to the reformatory. And while he's at the reformatory, we learn of all of the atrocities that are happening there. I think Tana Dew did a really good job of ensuring that we felt all of the emotions, we understood the anger, we understood the fear. Some things weren't stated until later, but the implication was there the entire time. I would say heed the trigger warnings for this book. Also, her great uncle, Tana Dew's great uncle, actually died at a school for the boys in Florida in 1937 that also inspired the telling of this story. What made this book really interesting for me, in addition to the historical context and learning in a fantasized way about, or fictionalized way about a lot of what was happening, is one, Tana did a good job of beautifully writing the story and stringing it together. I never wanted to not read it due to the writing. It was very engaging. It kept me wanting to know what would happen next. Even when it was hard, even when I put it down, I knew that I would come back to it. I also like the elements of spirituality and being able to get in touch with Hanks, and that aspect of it was actually really cool and an interesting twist as well. But it made all the sense in the world. I would say that this book I did realize that it's not very dialogue heavy, but you don't miss it. We spend a lot of time with these characters and their thoughts and their feelings, and it's really poignant and it really hits. You definitely understand everything that these characters are feeling, and you feel it intimately as well. And that's just good writing. And the name of the school is the Dozier School for Boys in Marianna, Florida. So if you want to look up more details, definitely do that. I would say that this book took me on a journey, but the thing that brought it all together for me was the ending. It made sense. It was well done. I was happy. Sometimes the way that books end can definitely like improve or decrease like my entire experience with the book. And this one, I enjoyed it all the way through. I would say the heaviest parts of this book are probably like the first half. The second half has a lot too, so it's not necessarily like easy, but I would say the hardest parts to read were definitely in the first half. So prepare yourself, but it's worth it to see it all the way through. I enjoyed the storyline, I enjoyed the plot, I enjoyed the characters. I appreciated getting exposed to these type of schools because it's not really just about that one school. She's writing it for all the schools like this that exist and have existed. And so I really, really enjoyed this book. I say it's hard, but it's worth it. It's one of those. And so every great read won't be an easy one. And this is one of those where it was hard, but worth it. And so I ended up giving this a read now. All right, so our last historical fiction will actually transition us into romance because it's both. It's historical fiction and it's romance. It's also the book that you all chose, the series that you all chose for me to finish in February, and that is the Davenports More Than This, the second book in the Davenport series. It's unclear if there will be a third one at this point, but I think there may be. And so this drops us back off into all of our characters and what's happening in their lives. If you read book one, you know that one character was engaged, so we get to like drop back into that storyline and all of the drama. We know that one character was supposed to go out of town and be a part of the activist movement and the resistance, and they ended up not going. We get dropped back into that storyline. We also have someone who is in love with a character, but their parents do not approve. And so, do they want their inheritance or not? We get dropped back into that storyline. And finally, someone is in love with a individual who is currently broke and does not have the stature and influence as they originally presented. And so the other person feels betrayed and lied to, but love is love. And so we can drop back into that storyline. I would say jumping back into all these characters was enjoyable. It started off as like a slow burn. I really expected to like jump in feet first. I actually went back and read like the last few chapters of the last book before picking this one back up just to refresh myself. And so I was really ready to like jump into this book. And it started out pretty slow for me. I would also say, though it started slow, once it picked up, it definitely picked up and kept me engaged, and I was satisfied. I mostly was pleased with the pacing. The writing was good. It was clear. I wanted to know what would happen with everyone. The story flowed well, so those were all pros. I would say towards the end, the only real con is that like at one point I was like, this is dragging. It felt a little draggy at the end, but then as the stories, like as the pages became less and less as I read, I was like, how is she going to wrap up all of these storylines in so little pages? And she did it. So it all ended up coming together. I was satisfied with the endings. I enjoyed it. I actually ended this book wanting more and wanting to know more. So that is always a good last impression. And I ended up giving this a read soon. I really enjoyed the characters. The new characters that we got, they were fun. They were really fun actually. So check it out. All right, y'all. Now we're going to transition into romance because I've been reading a lot of romance. We're going to start with light and easy romance before I get into my urban romance. So, if y'all are urban fiction lovers, which I know some of y'all are going to enjoy these. But before we get heavy into those, I want to start with a book that I actually read um, digitally. It was the first time I read this author, and the author has been everywhere. Y'all adore her work and her writing. And the book that I'm actually talking about is The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. And y'all, y'all might have been onto something when y'all said Abby Jimenez was like y'all favorite romance writer or one of them, because I really enjoyed this book. Well, it was actually a novella, and we have these two characters who wake up with plans for the day and realize that their front steps are missing, so they can't get out of their they can't get out of their housing unit. They're neighbors, and one neighbor is new. She recently moved in. We end up learning that she has a very traumatic story of why she's there and everything that's going on in her life. We also have our male character who's been there and who is in love with trees. He works in that space and he has so much tree knowledge. And it sounds so obscure, but it was so entertaining and endearing. Obviously, these two people grow closer over time. And well, because it's forced proximity, right? And so we have them in this forced proximity, but it feels authentic and natural. It was well paced. I also have in my notes that I really like the dedication. It was about the women who choose to bear and the men who do the work to understand why. So, with that understanding, that kind of conceptualizes the book a little bit. I became quickly emotionally invested in the book. I said she did a good job of making me understand the feeling of unsafety and a desire to be normal and do normal things. Once you read the book, that'll make much more sense. I don't want to spoil it. This was multiple POV. I usually always love POV, multiple POV, so that worked out. There was a portion where they talked about missing someone, but not really missing them, missing the version of them that didn't actually exist, and how hard that is to let that go. And I thought that was very spot on. I could relate to that. The only con I had is I said chapter 6 felt a little disjointed and that there may have been some cutout or missing context. But it was still really good. I ended up laughing out loud at multiple parts. I said it was short, but it packed a punch. I really enjoyed it, and it makes me want to read other books that I have from Abby Jimenez because I have like 3 or 4 other of their books, and I haven't read them yet, and I need to, and so I will, because this inspired me to want to push those up and get to them sooner rather than later. I ended up giving this little short read a read now. It was very touching, very endearing. I truly enjoyed it. All right, so the next book that I want to discuss is yeah, it is Mic Checks by Antoinette Sherrill. This is a part of the love of the Art of Hood Love series, which I have somewhere up here. Almost finished getting my library together. So these books will be organized in the order that I do really soon. But somewhere up here. Anyway, so if you've been following along with that series, you know that Relic, the eldest brother, is planning to start a record label. And if you've been keeping up with the blogs that Antoinette Sherrill has been posting on her website, this is what this is. This is a compilation of those blogs and some additional ones that she never posted that gives us that background and knowledge on the new signees to the record label, the new artists. And when I tell y'all it's so good, I have so much in my notes about this, but I don't want to spoil it. And I can't tell y'all without really spoiling it. But Relic, it's annoying because he's done horrendous things. But he's so captivating and you still want to root for him even though you're like, I don't want to root for you. So definitely good writing. I'm super invested in these characters. I am interested to know what's going to happen with Timmy and Sojourney and Calm. You got to read it to figure out what I'm talking about. But it's all so interesting. Learning more about Tech and just his background because it's kind of alluded to, but we never got it. So I really appreciate these because it gives us deeper dives into the characters that we already know. Of course, we get the main characters. We get Player P. We get a little bit of Shabu in here. We get Treasure. So that's nice. I really enjoyed it. I did as the con. I said that this could have used another copy edit. Listen, I love my urban fiction. I do. I do. But I'm gonna need the editing to be on par. Y'all, the stories are great. Like, take the time, get an editor, double, triple check. Like, because that's really the only kind here. I loved it. I ended up giving this a read soon. Um, I am so curious where all of these romances will go, but even more than the romance, I'm interested in these like characters trying to heal the traumas that brought them all to this point. All right, another book that I read virtually that I want to discuss is Tethered Love by Kimberly Brown. Y'all know I am new to Kimberly Brown, but quickly becoming a fan. And this story, oof, this one was definitely an interesting, wild ride. So we have multiple points of views. We have these two characters who eventually merge their lives, but we have a man who is set to get married to a woman, but he really wants children, and she has a child who's in college, and she's like, I don't know if I really want to start over. And so they're trying to figure out what that means. We have a woman who is taking care of her best friend's child. Her best friend died in childbirth and left her the child because she herself couldn't have children. And eventually, I won't tell you how, eventually these stories converge and we watch the romance blossom and bloom. There are some twists, some turns, and some dark roads in this story. I can say that it never got as dark as I thought that it might get because I think Kimberly Brown does a really good job of writing like contemporary romance. She may have some urban fiction books, I don't know, but like from what I've read, she never delves like too deeply into that side. So I feel like I can always breathe when I'm reading her books. I was like, it might get a little spicy, but it's not going to get dark. And so I ended up enjoying this book. It didn't go like exactly where I thought it would go, but it was a journey and I ended up enjoying it. I also have a beef with epilogues sometimes because I feel like they're a cheat code, but I feel like here it worked. It made sense. It brought it all together. I really enjoyed it. Kimberly Brown is a good writer, so I had no issues there. Again, copy edits, but minor issues here. Not my favorite work from her, but still enjoyable. I ended up giving this a read when you have time. All right, y'all, let me double check because I think that was the last book that I read outside of this author, where I read 3 of their books in a month. This you'll understand why. So the first book I read from this author, and the author is Jahquel J, was one of their new, I think it's their newest release, 10,000 Hours with a Rich Menace. Y'all, this book, so we have multiple points of view. We have Menace, who is interesting. He is someone who has like OCD. He has his own challenges, right? He's always had it, but he can also be a lot. Like he be putting people through it, right? And he knows that. He gets his name Menace fair square. We have Stevie, who gets caught up in a situation because she's just being naive, honestly and truly. She's just being naive. And so, because of her naivete, she ends up getting in a bad situation and her path crossed with Menace. And as her punishment for the crime that was committed, she has to marry Menace. And y'all, this story was wild in like the best way. I laughed so much. Menace was hilarious. I love that he called her Wonder. It was just so interesting. The comedy here was spot on. I love the fact that there was a character named Green and he called her every other name. Like just colors you wouldn't even think of. He called her every other name other than Green. And it was hilarious. I said that Jahquel J did a really good job of making me interested in all of the characters in their lives. Like, I really want to know what's going on in their lives in a real way. It was captivating overall, and I will read more of her catalog, and I did. I did say that she needs a different editor, and at the bare minimum, she needs an additional copy edit. There, oof, were so many like just issues in the book that the story was good enough that I wasn't going to stop reading, but it got annoying. Also, a flaw for me in this book is like I feel like she repeats things often that didn't need to be repeated. Like, for example, she'll say something and then slightly rephrase it immediately after, and I felt like it served no purpose. So at one point, I was like, are you trying to just fill words? There were also incorrect use of prepositions that were bothering me. One big thing that disturbed me was just some things I felt like weren't necessarily believable. And if I tell y'all what they are, it's going to be a spoiler. So, spoiler. So Stevie's friend offering up her virginity just off rip made no sense to me. I was like, I could see her doing it, but like there was nothing to imply that he would be interested in that. So that made no sense to me. Also, Menace is OCD, but he was picking at Priscilla's wig and pimples. I was like, that felt inconsistent to me with his diagnosis and how he lived his life overall. But those things aside, I had a good time. I had a good time, so much so that I had 3 books from Jahquel that I got. I actually have 4 books from Jahquel that I got at a book event last year. I immediately went to my shelf and pulled them off, and I am in it. Okay, y'all will see more of Jahquel in March wrap up as well. But for this book, I ended up giving it a read soon. I really enjoyed it, but I couldn't give it higher than that because it had so many issues. Now, we are going to transition to the second book I picked up by Jahquel. And that is, listen, Capone. If you know, you know. Okay? If you know, you know. This, the Delgado brothers are well known, Capone, Capadonna, and their sister Capri. I said this is like quickly captured my attention. Let me tell y'all what this book is about. I'm just going into my notes. So this book is about Capone. It's multiple POVs. We have Capone, and he is trying to take care of his family. His other half, his brother, is incarcerated, so he had to really step up. They were in the streets together. He really had to step up and put on for his family, and he does that. We also have Aaron, who it opens up with her in traumatic off rip at the very beginning. Her parents, well, her dad kills her mom and himself in front of her. That's how we get introduced to her and her struggles and challenges. Eventually, Capone and her path cross, and I love that from the moment Capone saw her, he was like, yeah, that's my wife. And every time I just think of that clip of old boy who was like, who, huh, right here, my wife. But I love that energy because if you know, you know. I said I appreciated the flow of the story and the pacing. I must say there were some lows, but never did I not want to finish the book. Sometimes I wanted updates on other storylines. So that, and I'm going to contradict myself with that in the second book. But in this book, I was enjoying it. But there were some other like off storylines. I was like, what's going on over there? What's happening with that? I wanted to know more. But I felt like I got enough and I got what I needed. I really enjoyed this work. Capone became one of my crushes, one of my book boos. I also had beef. You know, there were villains here. Tasha and Ella could catch these hands. I was like, they really didn't follow girl code, and I did not like that. I did like the cliffhanger at the end. So I immediately had to go grab book 2 because I was like, ain't no way. So the writing was good, captivating. Again, the editing here needed to have been stronger, but I really enjoyed it. A story was woven and I was tapped in. Okay. I enjoyed this very, very much. But again, the editing took away a bit for me. And I ended up giving this a read soon. Now, continuing on, I told you I couldn't stop. I went and picked up Capone II. And this continues on the journey of the story. At the end of book 1, we are left with this massive cliffhanger where people have been hurt and someone's going to take revenge. And then plot twists, the plot thickens, and revenge is not had in that moment. So I needed to pick this up immediately and say, okay, what is that really true? What is happening? And so I did. I did say this book is extra traitorous. It's some of the actions that were happening. Tasha, listen, listen. She was already on my crap list. Went higher on my crap list. She still ain't beating Moochie, but she up there. I liked it. I learned so much about Capri in this book. I really started to appreciate her more as a character. I do remember being frustrated because I know what happens in book 1. So Naheem was annoying me because I was like, boy, if you don't get the F out of here with what you're talking, we know what you've done. I felt like I enjoyed the first one more. This one didn't feel like a filler book, but It was slower paced, but it was still enjoyable. It definitely made me know that I would continue reading the series. So that's always a pro. And also a thing with this book, and it's happening with book three, but like I miss Capone. I didn't realize that I love hearing him more. That's why I was gonna contradict myself. In book one, I was like, what's happening with the other characters? In book two, we get more points of view, and the story makes sense. It progresses well, but I was like, where's Capone? I miss Capone. What is Capone doing? And so that was also a little con for me with this book. I ended up giving this a read when you have time, but it's good. You're going to be so tapped in that you're going to continue anyway. Let me double check y'all, make sure that I am telling y'all all the books that I read in February and that I'm not missing any. No, those are the 9 books that I completed. I started a bunch of other books in February. It's ridiculous how many books I am in the middle of. But I'm just going where I feel inspired to go. The story is grasping me, I am currently, I know that I told you all that I would be reading the 5th season, and I am in it. I hope to finish the series in March. I don't know though. I don't know if that's the space I'm in. I don't know if sci-fi and fantasy is really what I'm feeling at the moment. So I may shift that and I may read something else in March. I may read a different series. Or I may continue reading and get really into it. I don't know. Hard to tell. But those are the books that I read. I also want to put out a plug for us to all be reading books about the Congo and everything that is happening there. I know that times are tough here in the US as well, but we really need to be like learning, researching, and supporting in ways that we can. So one of the books that I hope to read and get to soon is actually Cobalt Red. And that's about everything that's happening in the Congo and the history of it and how it got here. So that is a book I'm hoping to get to inform myself more. I have another book here. I think it's When the Walking Defeats You, about the Congo and the internal strifes. And so I've had that one for years and have been meaning to read it. So those are some books that I am hoping to get to educate myself. I hope y'all do the same. Black History Month has ended, but as always, we are living Black history. So make sure that you are learning it and informing yourself. Let me know what y'all are reading in the comments. This is what I've been reading. I've still been working on my project that I will be announcing later this year. It will be debuting next year, but I will reveal it this year, and I'm so excited. I will let y'all know what that is later. I can't tell you now, but that's it for me. I missed y'all. Hopefully, I'll be back again soon. If not, well, I will be back again soon. But if it's not soon enough for you, um, if I don't have an official video up, make sure you're looking out for my lives. I pop on and I do reading sprints every once in a while. And so those are always a fun time. So I would love for y'all to join me and discuss the book I'm reading, and we can discuss the books y'all are reading. It's always a vibe. But that's it for me, y'all. As always, I am MsMalcolmHughes, one who believes that books are sometimes better than people. And until the next one, please remember to give time, to be kind to yourselves and each other, and to have the very best day of your life on purpose. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.